Okay, so yeah, I wasn't expecting the RX 7800 XT to perform so well, but seeing how well it's running Forza Horizon 5 at 4K extreme settings is really awesome. Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be putting together a powerful all AMD gaming PC using the all new AMD Radeon RX 7800 XT. This is one I've definitely been wanting to build around, and the version I have here is from Gigabyte. This is their RX 7800 XT Gaming Overclock 16 gig version, and I think we're going to see some really great performance out of this new AMD card. Now, along with the Gigabyte version of this card, we're going to be pairing it up with some other Aorus parts. We've got some RAM, motherboard, I've got a few other little odds and ends here and there, but yeah, I think this should turn out to be a really awesome little build. And as we start the build, I will go over all the parts that I used, and if you're interested in building something similar, I'll leave all those links in the description. But I'm actually ready to get this together because I'm really interested to see how this Radeon RX 7800 XT performs. Starting out here with one of my favorite cases on the market right now, this is the Dark Flash DLC29. It's a full mesh case. You can pick this up in white or black. Obviously, we've got the white version here. It'll support up to a 330mm GPU. We can do a front mount or a top mount AIO, and I've actually added a few RGB fans here. I personally do like using these Asia Horse fans. You can pick them up pretty cheap on Amazon, and they work out really well. Storage is going to be handled by a 2TB Aorus 7000 series NVMe SSD, so this is PCIe 4.0. The motherboard I opted to use is the X670 Aorus Elite AX. Obviously, we're going AM5 here, so we're going to be using a Ryzen 7 7700X. You could opt for an X3D if you wanted to, but I actually got a really good deal on this 7700X, so I figured I'd go ahead and build with it because it's definitely going to offer some really great performance. We've got 8 cores, 16 threads, it's based on Zen 4, and we've got a boost up to 5.4 gigahertz. I really do think this is going to pair up really nicely with the new RX 7800 XT. And since we're using an AM5 platform, we did have to go with DDR5 RAM. I went with 32GB of Aorus's RGB RAM. This will run it up to 6400 megahertz. So everything with the motherboard went together really nicely so far. We've got that CPU, RAM, and our SSD. Now we'll go ahead and slide the motherboard into the Dark Flash case. And like I mentioned, I did add a few RGB fans here. This should work with Gigabyte's RGB control center, so we can actually sync everything up. And with this, we'll also be able to sync up our RGB on the RAM and the cooler I opted to use here. But it looks like this AX motherboard fit right in this case. And to power everything, I went with this GamerX 850 watt fully modular power supply. This is actually the second one of these that I've purchased. The first one worked out really well in my Starfield build. I went with the 7900 XTX in that. It is a little overkill for the 7800 paired up with the 7700X, but a 650 watt to an 850, the price difference really isn't that bad, so I just went with this fully modular unit. To keep the Ryzen 7 7700X nice and chilly, I went with the ID Cooling 280mm XT Zoom Flow. I've used ID Cooling products quite a lot in the past, from their air coolers to their older AIOs, and I think this is going to work just fine for the 7700. And the final thing we need to add to this build that's really going to make or break it is the Radeon RX 7800 XT. Remember, this is the Gigabyte Gaming Overclock 16 gig version. Got a pretty beefy cooler here, 3-fan design, and it does require 2 8-pin PCIe connectors. But what I've seen so far with that RX 7800, I think this is going to be able to run basically anything we want at 1440, and a lot of the games that I personally like to play at 4K Ultra. So it looks like I ran into a little bit of a snag. Originally, I wanted to put this 280mm AIO as a front mount, but I had to swap it over to top mount just to fit this GPU in here nice. Now I could have kind of rerouted the tubing and everything like that, but it fits nice up top, and I think it's going to work just fine. Personally, I really do like the front mounts, especially with my tubes on the bottom, but if it just won't fit, I'll go top mount with it. But yeah, I do think this turned out really nice. I also added some cable extensions from Asia Horse just to clean it up a bit. Having that black motherboard against the gray GPU and just everything else white, I think looks really good. And again, I'm not a huge fan of RGB, but having everything synced up, I think kind of adds a nice little touch to everything. And I was able to get these Asia Horse fans synced up with the motherboard's RGB. So you can see we've got our RAM, our AIO, and all of our fans in sync here. I could have went all out with it, but I just added 3 up front, 1 in the rear. I could have replaced the AIO fans with these RGB fans also if I wanted to, but I think it's just a little too much if I go all out with everything there. I think what we have here is really tasteful, and these fans also come with its own controller, so you can actually set this up to be a bit different from the AIO and the RAM. Bunch of different presets here, so you can basically do what you want with a setup like this. Now that we're finished up here, I just need to get all of my drivers installed and we can get right on to some testing. Alright, so I'm running Windows 11 Pro, got everything updated, bunch of games that we're going to be testing out here. Real quick, I'll give you a look. You can see we've got that Ryzen 7 7700X, 8 cores, 16 threads, 32 gigabytes of DDR5, and I forgot to set the XMP profile from the BIOS, so before I get into testing, I will do that. But the main claim to fame here is the 7800 XT. Really want to see what this thing can do, and we're going to throw something pretty heavy duty at it up front. And that's going to be Cyberpunk 2077 with the 2.0 update. So right now, we're at 1440p Ultra settings. I'm not using any kind of ray tracing, but we will test that in just a second. And you know, at 1440p Ultra here, we're getting an average of around 87 FPS, which feels really good. And of course, you know, if you did want to run this at a steady 120 Hertz, you could do it at high settings. But I don't mind playing this at 1440, and I know a lot of people want to see what this thing can do with ray tracing. So we're going to head right in here, and we're going to go with Ray Tracing Ultra. Oops, I hate what they did with this new 2.0 update in these menus. It's a bit harder to navigate just because, you know, I've been using the original for so long. As soon as we get up here, we'll go to Ray Tracing Ultra, and with this preset, it will enable FSR. It's going to turn it to auto. So we're not quite going to be at 1440, but with these AMD cards and ray tracing, it does hit them pretty hard. And as you can see here, even with FSR set to auto, we're only getting an average of around 54 FPS with ray tracing set to ultra, which really isn't that bad for an AMD card. Even the 7900 XTX I recently tested had a little bit of trouble with ultra ray tracing here. But yeah, I mean, this is still playable in my opinion, and you know, taking ray tracing to high or medium will net you a little more out of it. Next thing I wanted to take a look at were some benchmarks, and the first one here is Geekbench 6. Keep in mind, this CPU is not overclocked. Single core, 2,583. Multi, 13,662. I mean, this is looking great on single and multi, really putting down the power. I also wanted to run the 3D Mark DirectX ray tracing feature test, and we got 33.95 FPS. Definitely not looking as good as the higher end NVIDIA cards, but I mean, we've got a little bit of ray tracing here with the 7800 XT. 3D Mark Firestrike coming in with a really impressive 38,846. And finally, Time Spy with an 18,078. So just judging by these synthetic benchmarks, this thing is going to be good for 1440p, and with some games we'll be able to max it out at 4K. So let's jump into some more gaming. When it comes to Forza Horizon 5, I consider this one of the best optimized games for PC because I've had really good luck on low-end stuff from iGPUs to low-end GPUs. And with this setup right now, we are at a 4K resolution, we don't have any resolution scale, and we're at extreme settings. So we've got this totally maxed out on the 7800 XT. Because with all of the settings I have right now, I'm averaging 110 FPS with this game. I cannot wait to test the new Forza Motorsports game with this setup. I think it's going to be great. Spider-Man Remastered is another one of those games that runs on this system flawlessly at 4K. So we're at very high settings with no resolution scale. FSR is completely off here. And I get an average of 83 FPS with this one. And keep in mind, you're going to see the same kind of performance with Spider-Man Miles Morales as we are here with Spider-Man Remastered. Another one I always like to test on these builds is Doom Eternal, and I know it's getting a bit older, but this is one of those games I want to see, you know, how far we can push it. And right now we're at 4K Ultra Nightmare, netting an average of 142 FPS with Doom Eternal on this setup. Really amazing performance, and so far, I mean, this has handled everything that I've thrown at it. But there's 2 more games here that, you know, really give any PC a run for its money, and the first one's going to be Starfield. Okay, so here it is. If you've played this game on any PC, you know, in these cities, it really dips that FPS down, no matter what you're doing here. This is Jemison, so it's not as hard as some of the other cities that you'll see in the game, and in order to get a 60 FPS lock with this game on the Radeon RX 7800 XT, we do need to enable FSR. We're at 80% resolution scale, 1440p, high settings.
I don't know how it is in your universe, but in this one, we try to avoid falls like that.
And the final one here is The Last of Us Part 1. 1440p, Ultra. I mean, we're right there on the edge at 1440p Ultra. Adding some more FSR would definitely help out, but I didn't see it dip under 60. Would be nice to just be a bit higher, but you know, outdoors with the longer draw distances, it will dip down to the mid 60s. So overall, really happy with the way this came out. That 7800 XT is definitely a great performer at 1440p for brand new AAA games. Of course, we can take some of the older stuff up to 4K, Ultra, max a lot of that stuff out. And the Ryzen 7 7700X is more than enough. So yeah, this is something I could definitely recommend. Love this little combo here. And if you're not looking to buy the 7900 XTX, then the 7800 XT is also a really good choice. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Really appreciate you watching. Let me know what you thought about the performance in the comments below. And if you're interested in putting something like this together, again, I've got all the links down below. If you've got any questions or you want to see anything else running on this, just let me know. And like always, thanks for watching.